Hello, friends. It's me, and welcome back to another episode. Today, we're going to explore the remnants of the once thriving city of Centralia, home to over 1,000 people. This town had everything: stores, restaurants, schools, parks, even a train. But one day the ground beneath them quite literally split open, and it began to burn. The earth was on fire, and the people were forced to abandon their homes and flee. The town was evacuated and has never been repopulated. The buildings were torn down, and entire streets were bulldozed away, leaving behind only a few structures and the memories of those who lived there. But most importantly, the fire still burns underneath all of this. Today, we are going to find out what happened to the town of Centralia, what caused the disaster that befell it, and why it is still burning to this very day. So get your boots on, because we're about to go ghost hunting. All the way back in the early 1900s, the area around Centralia was a hub for mining. Coal was so plentiful here that it was practically free for the taking. So, when plans were announced to build a railroad through the region, local miners jumped at the chance. They saw an opportunity to make a decent living doing something that they already did for fun. And if it wasn't apparent enough, they wanted to make the mining of coal a legitimate career. Thus, the town of Centralia was born. A community made up entirely of miners and their families. The town was small but proud. There were no more than a couple hundred residents in the town proper, but nearby communities like Mount Carmel, Ashland, and Herndon brought the total population to well over 1,000 people. These towns relied heavily on the railroad that cut through the center of Centralia. In fact, without it, the rest of the towns in the area would have never grown past small villages. So it was a necessity. And since the railroad provided such a convenience, the town grew quickly. Stores and houses popped up everywhere, and the community thrived until one day it didn't. On February 6, 1962, at approximately 3:30 p.m., the earth opened up and swallowed a car along with two teenage boys who were inside. Just like that, the peaceful quiet of the afternoon was shattered by the screams of the boys and the sound of crunching metal. Miraculously, both teens survived the fall, suffering only minor injuries. But their luck wouldn't last forever. When rescuers arrived at the scene, they discovered that the road had collapsed into an abandoned coal mine shaft. Now, these mines had been sealed off years ago after a deadly flood claimed several miners' lives. But somehow the ground had given way anyway. It was clear that the mine needed to be filled in before someone else got hurt. So the local government put together a plan to do just that. They would bring in some dynamite and fill in the hole once and for all. That, or they would drain the mine of water first, whichever came first. They decided on filling it in with dynamite. So on February 14th, exactly 1 week after the accident, several sticks of dynamite were dropped into the mine shaft. But unfortunately, instead of sealing off the mine, the explosion actually widened the hole. Now the mine was big enough to swallow a house, so local officials decided not to waste any more time. They ordered the remaining residents to evacuate immediately, and the town was abandoned. Or at least it should have been. It turned out that the local residents weren't keen on leaving their homes, no matter how dangerous they might be. And so they stayed, even though the town had been completely cut off from the outside world. Food shortages were imminent, and the threat of death hung heavy in the air. By March, the situation had become so dire that the mayor called in the National Guard to prevent looting. At this point, the ground had begun to crack and smoke was pouring out of the fissures. It was clear that the mine was heating up and things would soon get much worse. On March 28th, flames erupted from the ground and everyone fled. But this was only the beginning. As the weeks and months went on, the fire spread and grew larger. Entire streets were consumed by the hungry blaze and dozens of buildings burned to the ground. By May, the town was effectively abandoned, and the buildings that remained standing were nothing but charred skeletons. But the fire still raged on. Then in July, the unthinkable happened. The ground gave way under Odd Fellows Cemetery, and 300-year-old headstones tumbled into the fiery abyss. The cemetery had been the final resting place of many of the town's founders and other prominent community members. But now their bodies were nothing but bones. And when I say bones, I mean literal bones. During the course of the disaster, several human skeletons were found intact within the ruins of Centralia. One man even found his own father's skeleton sitting in an armchair in their home. If you can imagine anything more haunting than a ghost town, then please let me know in the comments section below, because I sure can't. Now, this isn't even the scariest part. The fire kept burning and burning and burning. In fact, it still burns to this very day. But why? I mean, they blew up the road. They bulldozed the buildings, and they even drained the mine of water. What could possibly be fueling this fire all these years later? Well, don't ask me. Ask Mother Nature herself. See, the thing is, once a coal seam catches fire, it becomes extremely difficult to extinguish. And that's because coal seams aren't just single lines of coal. They're more like thick carpets spanning across entire sections of land. The firefighters were able to stop the flames from spreading further east, but they couldn't stop it from spreading south. In fact, the fire spread so far south that it eventually reached the town of Mount Carmel. And since this town was built right on top of the same coal seam, the residents had to abandon their homes as well. By 1965, the fire had reached its peak, covering an area of 275 acres and extending almost 3 miles. All efforts to stop the fire had failed. So officials had only one option left: flood the entire area and drown the fire. But even that didn't work. The mine was flooded 3 times over, but each time the water level dropped, the fire would only grow larger. There's only one possible explanation for why the fire won't go out. There's still oxygen left in the mine for it to feed on. And even though the mines were sealed decades ago, new cracks in the earth are constantly allowing fresh air to trickle in. At this point, the fire is so deeply ingrained in the town that there's no hope of recovery. The entire community is nothing but a smoldering ruin. However, every once in a while, the ground will give way and remind the world that Centralia is still there. In 1984, a massive sinkhole opened up near the old train tracks and swallowed a car. No one was inside at the time, but it goes to show that the ground is still unstable. In 2011, another sinkhole appeared, this one directly in the middle of the road. Once again, no one was hurt, but the town still stands in danger of complete collapse. But perhaps the saddest part of this story is that no one knows what to do about it. Officials can't flood the mine without damaging the surrounding environment. They can't drain it without causing the fire to spread. And they can't blow it up without risking the lives of those working on it, not to mention the cost. Fixing this mess would be outrageously expensive, and no one is willing to foot the bill. And so the town of Centralia remains a ghost town to this very day. The streets are empty, the buildings are gone, and the fire still burns. Perhaps one day we'll figure out a way to stop it. But until then, we should probably leave the poor skeletons of Centralia alone. If you enjoyed this video, please feel free to check out my others. Also, please subscribe and comment below. It really helps my channel grow. Thanks for watching. Have a good night and stay safe.